sorry. I'm like.
She's like, what do you mean, Christian?
Oh, I got all kinds of jokes about architects today.
Actually, I'll turn off.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the second day of our 19th annual Municipal Green Building Conference and Expo, and our first ever Community Green. I'm going to introduce a member of our community here in just a moment, but I hope you're enjoying our program today and that you'll stick with us through the afternoon. After our keynote now, we'll highlight a few of our afternoon sessions that are coming up to give you a preview of what's to come. And with that, I'd like to introduce Christiane Scholbegen, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Sustento Group. Christiane has more than 12 years of commercial real estate experience, driving successful marketing and business development strategies. And before joining Sustento Group, she held multiple positions at Colliers International, where she was the marketing arm of over 1.5 billion in transactional value and over 50 million in estimated commissions. Christiane serves as the Vice Chair of USGBCLA's own Women in Green Committee, and is part of the Urban Land Institute's Women's Leadership Initiative Grow Mentorship Program 2020. With that, I'd like to introduce Christiane.
Thank you so much, Ben. Hi, everyone. It is my absolute honor to represent USGBCLA's Women in Green Committee today, where our mission is to provide a forum for women and allies to make an impact in Los Angeles, to build networks, to celebrate women leaders like Gabrielle, to create an inclusive, healthy, sustainable, and resilient community for all. Gabrielle Bullock has represented this mission throughout her career. From her childhood in the Bronx, Gabrielle knew that she wanted to be an architect. She now oversees Perkin & Will's Diversity Inclusion Engagement Program, which works to support and strengthen a firm-wide culture that embraces justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Her unique abilities marries her passion for architecture and social justice to effect positive change. She is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, a member of the National Organization of Minority Architects, the previous president of International Interior Design Association, and a brand new recipient of the 2020 AIA Whitney Young Jr. Award. I had the pleasure of getting to know Gabrielle a few days ago as we prepared for today, and it is truly her genuine curiosity for humanity that makes her so special. Welcome, Gabrielle. Please take it away.
Thank you, Christiane. And good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here on this hot Saturday. So the theme of the conference, as I understand it, is equity and community. Shouldn't that be the norm? Shouldn't we all have fair, equitable access and opportunity to housing, health, wellness, open space, environmental safety, good design and economic stability? Of course we should, but we haven't because of our sameness approach to design and planning, the narrow lens with which we have historically viewed, learned, and practiced design, the predominantly male, predominantly white, privileged, and colonial approach to design. And of course, our historic and current unfair and discriminatory practices, policies, and beliefs that exist in our society have created inequities in communities. So what's our role? What's our responsibility toward equitable communities? I'm going to focus on how just and equitable communities are our responsibility to foster, nurture, and build as stewards of the built environment. And then share with you that Jedi lens that I'd like you to start wearing. As Christiane said, I've been focusing on diversity, inclusion, and engagement for 8 years now with Perkins & Will. I've had this role for 8 years. Not only for the profession, not only for the firm, but for the profession and building the pipeline of a more diverse future. And our belief, oops, did not do this. There we go. Sorry, y'all. So this is our mission statement around diversity, inclusion, and engagement. And we've had a lot of success over the last 8 years, making progress, focusing on diversity and inclusion. But the second sentence, reflecting the communities we serve, has been a polite way of saying we must achieve more racial diversity. Well, that's been the most difficult issue to tackle and explain, particularly to those who say, we can't find them. Don't we want the best? Or worse, not having the difficult conversation around race and equity at all. D&I, diversity and inclusion, are not enough. Race and equity has been the elephant in the room. It's at the core of not only our profession, but our society, communities, and our communities that have been marginalized, underserviced, or underinvested. So talk about that Jedi lens, how we can make a difference. So we are in unprecedented times. It's a trifecta of crises, or as I call it, a cosmic reset. I don't think we have a choice but to change the way that we do things. So the health crisis from the pandemic and its impact on marginalized and frontline and communities of color, social and racial justice crisis, economic and environmental crisis. And we are facing a reckoning in this country that we have not seen in over 60 years. So to go beyond diversity and inclusion to Jedi, we must lead with justice and equity. And so if you think about it, if you look at the work that we do and how we live through justice and equity, we will achieve the outcome of diversity and inclusion. So we must embrace, understand, and advocate for design justice through Jedi lens if we are to achieve equity and community. And what that really means is going from the status quo, the way that we've always done things, to a different way, to a Jedi way, to examine, propose, share leadership behaviors needed for a true, full culture of equity and inclusion. And what you see on the screen is something from our Leadership Institute within Perkins and Will, where I challenged our emerging professionals, our emerging leaders, to think about what kind of leadership behaviors do we need? What does it mean going from the status quo to Jedi? And some of these are a little bit mundane. I'll take the second one on the left. So all the ones on the left are the things that we currently do, and the ones on the right is what we should be doing under the Jedi lens. And something very mundane, getting a rendering done for South LA for a project that I'm gonna share with you in a minute was insanely difficult to find images, entourage of digital content of diverse people for these renderings. So as a firm, we have circulated a petition to all content developers to up their game and to insist on culturally representative images. That's just one example. I think that we need to look at our design processes and with what lens do we approach design. It's typically been a Eurocentric Western ideology. I think we should be more ethnically and culturally curious and competent. Don't lead with assumptions. Yes, architects, we think we know everything and we think we know what people want. I challenge us all to lead with questions and curiosity. And then regarding how to build our pipeline, we need to build it. It's not there yet, but we need to build it. And if we think the future depends on this, then we ought to be the ones to do that. So this all requires, those are steps, but it does require us to get out of our comfort zone, have the difficult conversations. The image you see on the screen is from our Houston office and their discussion board around having a difficult conversation around race that practically all of our offices have had. And so having those difficult conversations, educating ourselves and learning what the barriers, attitudes are that perpetuate inequitable conditions. And most importantly, adopt an empathetic, not sympathetic, attitude about what communities face and what they want. And recognize our roles as stewards in dismantling these barriers. I think it's now or never. Equity in communities is much very important, as we've seen over the last 6 months from the pandemic through the racial injustices. And that's what's different. You know, we can't unsee what we've seen. We can't unsee George Floyd's murder, Breonna Taylor's murder, and other Black lives murdered. We can't unsee the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our communities. The public outcry and protest against racial and social injustice have largely come from young and a diverse population, which gives me tremendous hope about our future. This is also the difference between today and 60 years ago in the civil rights movement. Of course, there's the environmental crisis that I think we need, and I'm sure you all have been talking about that this last 24 hours at your conference. All of these, some consider a movement. Well, the very word move means action. So let's not let this just be a movement. Let's make it actionable for a better future. And for this, I'll just say any broken segment of society is a broken society for all. And a sustainable and equitable society is a resilient one. So in a nutshell, I think, you know, what we really need to do in order to create more and support more equitable communities is come at it from creating a collective understanding of cultural competency. Triangle on the left shows you all the different pieces: equity and social justice, environmental protection, economic development, but in the middle is sustainability. And then the things on the areas on the sides of the triangles are usually things that we don't think is in our purview. I think that all of these areas, environmental protection, economic development, equity and social justice, all impact the very notion of sustainability and resilience. And in each of these societal realms, we have the opportunity to challenge that status quo, influence our clients, teams, and communities to change the course. We often think economic development or real estate zoning policies and covenants are outside of our responsibility or purview. And those are the very things that have perpetuated inequitable communities. I say challenge them all if they present barriers to equity. It is within our responsibility to do no harm. I would also say around equity, you know, representation does matter, but if we can't represent the culture and the communities that we're dealing with, then we must research, learn, and become culturally competent. We must be willing to say, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm willing to listen. And we don't know what's best if we don't ask. The cultural competency continuum you see on the right, at the very bottom, it's destructive, cultural defectiveness, where people actively belittle other cultures. And then it goes up from there to cultural competency, where people unconsciously hold culture in the highest esteem and use this to guide their lives and work. That's where we ought to be. Where I think we are today as a profession, we're somewhere between cultural incapacity and cultural blindness. And I want to focus on cultural blindness for 1 minute. That says that where people treat all cultures as if they are the same. Well, that means you don't see me. You don't see the value of my culture. I think through a focus on cultural competency and how to get there and what it means will bring us all the way up to the very top and it'll be second nature. At the core of all of this is belonging. All communities want, citizens in communities, they want to belong and they want to thrive. And so engaging the community in our designs is very important. We design for them, with them. I'm going to share an example of how we incorporated these concepts in this project. And this is Destination Crenshaw in South Los Angeles on Crenshaw Boulevard. It is an outdoor art and cultural experience of 1.3 miles on Crenshaw, both sides of the street, series of pocket parks, art installations, etc. And there were no preconceived notions for this project. I will say that representation did matter in this case. The client specifically wanted a team, contractors, and architects that represented the community, that understood the culture. It was a sense of trust and shorthand connection that they were looking for. And because it's a privately funded project, they could do that. And it's not just representation. Clearly, we have the expertise and the design capability to do this, but that was very important for this particular client. The thing that we did consistently was community engagement. The community was a partner, a design partner, with the entire project. And we listened to their stories. We heard what they saw for their community. We didn't tell them. And that's inclusion. The flip side of that, or the opposite of that, is exclusion. When we just we do stakeholder intake. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're listening or responding. For these 4 communities of color, particularly in South LA, don't assume a community is downtrodden and you are the savior, particularly communities of color. They don't want a savior, they want a partner. The outcomes of this project, I suspect, will be, it will avoid cultural erasure. It will highlight the strengths of the community, not a recreation of the community. It will foster economic growth and be a true destination and a source of pride and ownership for this community. So here's where the call to action comes. We have to walk the walk. Examine your processes, your systems that you have in place, put everything on the table, and ask the reason why. Have those conversations, and if you need them facilitated, have them facilitated. And be willing to ask yourself, why do you do what you do? Deconstruct and reverse engineer your practices, policies, and approach. And look at your planning process, planning and design. Lead with cultural competency, challenge the status quo, and take that Jedi stance. And then finally, probably the most difficult thing to do is challenge your clients. Know when to say no. And I know it's hard to say no to a client, almost impossible. But I'll give you an example. We were recently looking at partnering with a developer in a community of color. And we realized that that developer had a track record of gentrification, of being a gentrifier. And that was too much of a risk. It would be too detrimental to the community. So we declined. That's the kind of stance that, and look at our clients that we all must do if we're gonna move the needle. So ultimately, this effort is about creating a new baseline in both our communities and our profession in terms of prioritizing issues of equity within the sustainable design effort. So we all must amplify our advocacy and action. Actively advocate for a more just and equitable society through your lane as stewards of the built environment. And in John Lewis's words, find a way to get in the way. Thank you. I do want to add one thing. I've started a podcast with my good friend and colleague, Karen Compton, and it's called Breaking the Silence of Design. And it's meant to have those difficult conversations. So check it out if you will, just minor plug. Thank you very much. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you for your time today with us. And for anyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, and we can relay those for you. And maybe while we're waiting, Gabrielle, just to localize things a little bit, I would ask a question to maybe kick things off, and just in terms of what do you think you'd like to see on a more local level here in LA? You know, are there actionable organizations that you think we should get involved in? Describe maybe what you see here in our region.
Well, I think NOMA is a wonderful organization to get involved with. They are at the front, they're on the front lines of building the future pipeline through their summer camp, their pipeline camp. Also a resource for everybody. I think that what I really like to see is everybody have a conversation. And I know the conversation is happening sporadically, hopefully more than I'm aware, but we really need to get comfortable being uncomfortable and having the conversation and what's at stake. I think challenging our officials, getting deep into what the city policies are, and in our own lane, how can we fix that? The AIA, this organization, I think there's a lot that everybody can do to arm themselves with some information about where are the barriers. I mean, it's easy to say there's systemic racism and there are barriers, but what are they specifically? Well, I don't know all of them, but I do know some. I think we all should. And then finally, everybody should vote.
Yes, we all need to vote. It's very important. Nothing's going to impact us as much as voting for the next 4 years in the months to come. So
Hi, Kate. Hi, Kate Diamond. I see you.
Hey, Gabrielle, I wanted to share that your good friend Cheryl Durst gave a very empowering keynote yesterday, and she sends really warm regards. We were checking off how many people we knew in common, and you were right at the top of that list. Jack Travis right behind you.
Yep.
It was great. I really appreciate your participation here. I also think that the session that we just held with Trade Tech and how they're improving the pipeline, we need, there is such a challenge of falling into tokenism. And what we don't want to have, you and I have both been lonely in various positions where you're the only Black woman architect for miles around, and suddenly everyone is asking you to represent all of the Black woman's point of view, or I'm the only woman around, and I know that. So how do we make sure in our offices and studios that we're not just bringing someone in and maybe setting them up for frustration and kind of, it's not enough to have a whole bunch of wonderful, fabulous junior people in the process. We need people in leadership positions and other places like that.
Right. Well, I think we need to, you're right, because we could be on the verge of tokenism, which would be a disaster. So that's why I say we have to look at all of our practices. If you are hiring Black and brown people that you have never had in your office before, you just can't hire them and let them, you have to explore what they need, what they want, guide them through a process that they may not be used to. Many of them first generation college graduates, right? And embrace what they bring to the table, their lived experiences, their cultural perspective. That's the value of having a diverse workforce and team. It's not that we have to have one of these and two of these or three of these. If you have none, then what does that say about the perspective that you're putting onto your projects and your teams and your designs, right? There was a question here that I would like to answer, and that's, what are your tips to help to get buy-in on D&I initiatives and workshops from firm leadership? Well, one, it has to come from the top. If there is not firm leadership, it will not go anywhere. So I would suggest that one tip is to prepare and communicate the urgency of it all. And that means someone has to do some research for that organization and lay it out there. This is a business imperative. It's a cultural imperative. There's plenty of research that says the more diverse you are, the more successful, more profitable, blah, 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 blah. that it should not be the why, it should be the how. So if that helps, I would, do that. When I proposed this focus for the firm, I did a one-page white paper around the imperatives. And for me personally, how I knew I had a perspective of a Black female architect that I could impart on it, and I could see how the lack of cultural diversity, racial diversity, cultural competency impacted projects we did overseas. How we might have been applying that same sameness lens, right? So short answer is, put your neck out there, take a risk, and write something up and present it to your people.
Are there any other questions from the audience? And I'm going to go ahead and share some of our upcoming sessions. I just want to say that we're honored to have you with us here today, Gabrielle. And I would echo the point you made too, that there's amazing data out there around the returns for businesses who invest in diversity. And that's an argument that leadership should always be listening to if they want to have a more successful firm. I think that data is so important, and would love to try to get more of that accessible on a local level to help drive more acceptance and more leadership in that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to sign off now. Have a good day, everybody.
Gabrielle.
Thank you.
So I hope you can stick around and join us. We have our next round of community green sessions. We have a workshop on the LA Eco Village, a 2050 model for urban sustainable communities. Our legacy project this year is being featured in a great session called The Sunflower That Grew from Concrete, Resiliency and Reentry in the Garden. And then our third workshop is on workforce preparedness in a future of drought-tolerant landscaping, showcasing how native plants, drought-tolerant practices
Vacuum what?
can really produce long-term sustainable landscaping.
But I'll vacuum everything else now. And then you can do the sofa and the
So I
rug.
hope you can join us. And then just want to highlight also later this afternoon, we have virtual tours of the Passive House, LADWP's Lacrette's Innovation Campus,
Virtual tour of the passive.
and SCE's Irwindale Energy Education Center. Someone's excited about the virtual tours, which I appreciate. Thank you for taking the time with us today, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Ben.